use the example of every other big company. Buying things on Amazon is easy. Buying things on Target.com is easy. Ordering my coffee on the Starbucks app is easy. Like, let's do that in every other part of our life.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Raving Patients podcast. I want to thank our sponsors, both Cloud Dentistry and the Doc site. So when their commercials come up, please take a listen. Please reach out if you're interested in learning more. Today's guest is Ted Kozel from Socius Marketing. Ted, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Why don't we get you to talk a little bit about yourself, which sometimes is difficult for people, but kind of give your background, what your job is, how you help dentists. Give us that type of information to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my start in dentistry was that I am my mother was an office manager at a pediatric dentist's office, and it was pretty close walking distance after school. So I would occasionally help out with filing. I got to fire a few x-rays, which I don't think is probably the safest thing to let a child do. But I was definitely exposed to some of the dental world, especially on the management side of it and that office manager piece. Later in life, I worked for a sleep testing company, an at-home sleep testing company, and they were primarily cardiologists, pulmonologists, and I would have dentists coming on board. And frankly, at the time, I didn't really understand why they were interested in sleep apnea. So I sat down and talked to them, and it became I understood how dentistry can do more than I think a lot of people think. I then moved into digital marketing for dentistry and into a couple other verticals. And now I'm the director of healthcare sales at Socius. And I work on the healthcare side. We've been around since 2008, I want to say. Always have had a foothold in medical with hospitals, urgent care, dentistry, dental labs, a little bit of everything. And, our specialty is on the digital side. We're not an agency, although I've done everything from, website SEO, pay-per-click, billboards, TV, in-office consulting, you name it. Like, we stick to the digital side. And I think we're really, really good at it. And I like working specifically on the demo side a lot.
Perfect. That's really good. And as you may or may not know, I was one of the first people to really focus on digital marketing, and I started teaching digital marketing. So I really never did your traditional advertising. I never did Yellow Pages. I never did a billboard in my life. I did some magazines in the beginning, just for brand awareness. I did an ad in Philadelphia Magazine, which got great results for me for a period of time. But I also was one of the first businesses to be able to prove to Philadelphia Magazine that the ads weren't working, because I tracked the phone numbers and I could show them there was a lift, and then all of a sudden everything went down after over a number of years. So, but I am 100% into digital marketing. I don't really believe in traditional marketing anymore. I don't think it works. If people don't watch TV like they used to. They watch on recording. I only watch live TV at sports. I don't watch any live TV otherwise. So, that type of marketing to me doesn't work as well. I know people still do it and are really successful, but that's not my cup of tea. So I love the fact that we're talking about digital marketing here.
Yeah, I will say my family still occasionally uses the Yellow Pages. It was a great way for my youngest daughter to reach the sink when she was brushing her teeth, but opening it, not so much.
That's great. For a second there, I was like, where's he going with this? And then what you said, that was great. That was really good. I used to hold doors open with it. That's what I do with my Yellow Pages. So that was a great example. Love that. So let's talk about, or let's get into some of the things we wanted to talk about today. And let's go with the face of the practice, your online billboard, the main place you want to send all your patients to, and that's websites. And I actually give a class called Dominate Your Marketing Online, whether it be 2 hours to full days. I talk literally from A to Z on marketing. And one of the things I spend a lot of time on is one's website. So why don't you talk about some of your must-haves or things that you need to have on a website?
Yeah, I think the most important thing to realize is that that's changing a lot. And there are things that are constants that you want to be easy. You need your logo to be front and center. You need ways to get in touch, be it if it's a form or if it's a scheduler or it's a phone number. Some of these things just sometimes people forget. I think one of the things that I so often see in marketing, especially when it comes to dentists, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this, is They spend a great deal of time learning how to be a clinician, and very little is dedicated on how to be a business owner. And you get the opportunity to run a business and to truly be an entrepreneur. And sometimes it's just one of those that you sometimes forget to look around the room or look around your website and see what's there or not there. So simple things like the About Us is usually the second most visited page on your website besides the homepage, because you're going to, number one, want to see the doctor that you're visiting. Or if you've booked, who am I talking to on the phone? What does it look like inside? Getting an understanding, trying to build that trust. It's one thing to get somebody to the site. It's a whole nother to get them to convert and to come in, even beyond scheduling. Getting them scheduled and getting them to walk through the door, sometimes there's additional steps. There are so many little things that you could focus on and touch on. Things like, your phone number, being on the website, number one, and then number two, on mobile, is a click to call. Having these things that seem like every other app in the world is really easy. I can use Amazon and buy just about anything with my thumb. And yet we have, a medical office that is still sometimes stuck in the Stone Age with the way their website functions, or that first vision that they're giving to a potential patient.
It's interesting that you said that, and I'm in a huge agreement with what you said, especially with the phone number, but it's crazy. And I'm curious on this. I have my own opinion, but before I say my opinion, I want to ask you a question of you. When it comes to the contact information that people are looking for, so let's call it the name of the office, the name of the doctor, the phone number, and the address. Okay, that's like main information that someone's going to want to see. What is your feeling on where it needs to be placed on a website more often than not?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the prefaces that I would give would be if it's a single office or a multi-office, because a multi-office, it's a whole nother beast, and then you need to try to figure out where I am in relation to what city, town, village. I think the phone number should be front and center. I think typically it's in the footer at the bottom of the homepage. What you want to eliminate with anything that you're doing on your website is eliminating friction. I shouldn't have to click here, scroll here, click this out, do math problem, let you know my blood type, go through a million different things to get the type of information that I am as a potential buyer looking for. So I think the phone number needs to be absolutely front and center. And the contact us, or the information on the practice, I feel should be on the homepage. And certainly, like, you could have additional information in a contact form or a location form.
So, what do you feel about it? And I'm always a proponent of getting that information. I know you mentioned in the footer. I like it at the top of the page because I don't want to have patients scroll down to the bottom. Phone number definitely has to be on top, and you have to be clickable, and I agree with you 100%. But I also think that someone's looking for the address. If you're in a town like, Philadelphia, you're not going to drive from one end of Philly to the next. So you have to know where the office is located. So there's so many website companies that only put it in the footer. They don't put it at the top of the page. Now, you mentioned the footer as well. So I've always been a proponent of putting it at the top. So I know you want it in the footer, but why not have it at the top of the page?
The reason I mentioned specifically having it at the top and then at the footer comes down to the mobile application of it. Like when we design a website, we're designing it not only to work on your screen and not only to fit down to a phone size, but to function more like an app. So you'll have the company header at the top of your phone, and then like the contact us, the call us button, those things. I don't have a problem with the address being up at the top, but there needs to be some consideration when you're working on a tiny MacBook, an 80-inch TV, whatever the case, making sure that it adjusts correctly based on different screen sizes. Because just ultimately, I think sometimes you can run out of real estate.
Yeah, and that's something that I think is important because you need to, and I don't know if many people know, but you can actually look at it on the source code in Chrome. You can go and see what it looks like on different size phones, different size screens. But you should check out your website on all the different, because literally it's going to look great on a 27-inch, great on a 21-inch. When you get down to this big of a screen, the website doesn't look normal again. So I think you have to do your own testing on that as well. So I think that's a really good tip you just gave there.
Yeah, that's the reason we moved to that app-like design of having the buttons, sticky buttons at the bottom of the screen on mobile, and having the logo and phone number at the top. Because once again, trying to eliminate friction, make things as easy as possible. If you're looking for, like, use the example of every other big company. Buying things on Amazon is easy. Buying things on Target.com is easy. Ordering my coffee on the Starbucks app is easy. Like, let's do that in every other part of our life.
I agree. You want to emulate success, and that's really, really important. So you talked about your phone number being clickable. What other things do you think a website has to have?
It depends on the type of patient you're looking for. So I think services are a big part. Services are the procedures, meaning, I'll use a different example than dental. I'll use home improvement. If you went to Ted's Roof and everything on it talked about roofing, and there was one little blurb or one little bullet point that said we also do windows, I don't think you'd probably earn a lot of window business because it doesn't seem like it's important to you. So moving that over to dental, if you're interested in orthodontics or sleep apnea or dental implants or any of these procedures that we know is ultimately a competitive market, you need to put your best foot forward to kind of prove that is, no other way of saying this, something that you sell and something that you sell well and something that the office is prepared to work with as opposed to, accommodating. We specialize versus accommodating.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Anything else that you think is also an important must-have on a website?
Yes, and I don't know specifically the best answer to give on this, but the thing that we all need to start being aware of is this word accessibility. Ultimately, accessibility is something that I think is going to get a little bigger, and there'll probably be some rules around it. And not to try to dumb it down too much, but accessibility means is it easy to read? Are you, tagging the imagery so they can have a, readable text if somebody has vision problems, all these things. And I'll frequently see things like white text on a white picture. It's hard to read with great vision. Doing some of these things while there's no clear definitions of saying the text needs to be this size or this color is acceptable. Trying to at least prove or put some effort into being more accessible, I think is ultimately going to protect yourself as a business, because we've seen it in other industries that there are lawyers that will go after an office, not really representing anyone, or go after a business because of something done, I wouldn't say incorrect, but something that could have been much better.
So what you're referring to here, just to be very clear, and is you need to be ADA accessible, ADA compliant, and that's American Disability Act compliant, not the American Dental Association compliant.
Correct.
so just to clarify that. But there are plugins that you can get for a website that are very easy they cost $50 a month, and they will make your website compliant with their coding that they put on there. So
they will make it more compliant. I don't think that's the thing. I don't think compliance has truly been defined, where you can say, like I said, 16-point font and lower is bad. It's not that defined yet. I think what you need to do is make an active effort to prove that you've done something.
So you're not the target of these frivolous lawsuits that are coming out there, which has been hidden with a lot of the industries out there. So, and in my class, believe it or not, I told you, I give a class called Dominate Your Marketing Online. One of the things I think you have to have is you have to be ADA compliant. And I talk about a product called Accessibility, which seems to be there's AudioEye, there's a number of them. I'm very familiar with this space. So, a lot of the website companies include these types of compliance already in the packages.
Yeah, we actually build specifically around it as well, to try to get it as close to being accessible, air quotes, as possible from the beginning. So yeah, there's plugins, there's different tools you can run to test. But just create, like you said, make yourself less of a target.
And then before we go on to another topic, what is your feeling about online scheduling, like automated scheduling versus an appointment request? And what about some type of chat product or some way to reach out to the office after hours and still communicate with them?
I think there's lots of technologies out there that are absolutely wonderful. I am a fan of using online schedulers, more so than forms. I don't particularly like open forms, but if you don't have that in place, I suppose that is an option. I think we're living in a world where we don't necessarily want to talk on the phone. I've had a cell phone for years and years and years. I don't know what my ringer sounds like. It's on silent. I try to keep it that way. A lot of what we do is by text, and this idea of chat absolutely makes a ton of sense. It also lightens the load on an office, which, in the marketing world, my job is to help make the office busy. And, anything that can help lighten the load, but still drive patients, I think is fantastic.
Okay. So let's talk about the second topic we wanted to cover, which is the ownership of assets, which I know is a big thing. I have nothing against the companies that own the assets, but obviously, and that's a very big controversial thing when it comes to website companies. So talk about your feeling on ownership of assets.
What I think is important is that ownership of assets or websites isn't necessarily or inherently the problem. I think what it comes down to is that you're building something as a business owner. And I think renting a product doesn't always make sense. There are some situations where it does, like if you had vehicles, a fleet of vehicles, you wouldn't necessarily buy them day one. You would potentially be leasing them because it makes sense as a business. I think there does reach a tipping point where you need a level of customization, and that includes content, not having duplicated content that's sold across multiple platforms that you're essentially renting or borrowing. And this is the same thing. And, 50 other practices, maybe one's down the street, maybe it's in Alaska, who knows? I think that's incredibly important. And I think the idea of paying for something in perpetuity that you could buy as a website doesn't necessarily make sense in most situations. I mean, you plan to be in practice for several years. Why are you going to rent things forever?
The only reason I think that has some validity to it is if you're a brand new practice, you have minimal funds, and you can always upgrade to a later date to a better website per se, or someone that you're not renting from, or to so you can purchase it like we talked about. But there are some instances where budgeting, I think, will be the main focus of that they don't want to spend the money or can't afford to spend the money.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like I said with the vehicles. Like when you're first starting out, you wouldn't necessarily buy the fleet of vans. You would be leasing them, but the goal would be that you're buying them and eventually wrapping them in your company name and all those pieces. It's not. You don't have to put these gigantic investments in place right away. And I think there are certainly times where even going from a custom website versus a theme or some of the templated aspects of design, it depends on where you are in the growth of your company and where your goals are.
No, I agree 100% with that. The next thing we wanted to talk about was transparency and reporting. And, I am a big stickler when I reach out or when people reach out to me and I say, okay, what is this company doing for you that you're spending $1,800 a month on? And they go, I don't know. I'm like, that's a major problem. Although some of those people also say, what's your overhead?
I don't know.
And so that's a problem. But in specifically when it comes to reporting, I'm curious your thoughts on what type of reporting you think a website should be providing, what is important. Obviously, it's like looking at an x-ray on a screen for some people. The patients don't know what they're looking at, so showing them an x-ray is pointless. A lot of dentists don't understand what they're going to get in the reporting, so sometimes it's pointless. But what are some things you think that a company should provide to the dentist or company using their product?
Yeah, I mean, there are some really predictable and relatively straightforward numbers that you can get. I think probably my biggest frustration in the industry as a whole, having seen this for over a decade, and this frankly happens in a lot of articles, is this idea of sort of like making up a reporting feature, of you can be transparent, but still be making something up. Like there's this, you could have like, well, Ted's digital marketing company finds it really important for us to, track your whatever widgets. And this month, good news, you have 15 widgets. Next month is even better. We get 18. That may be true, but is it translating to anything of real value? I don't think it's per se that companies are making up numbers. I think they are selectively highlighting what makes the most sense for them to report on. And I think there is some validity to showing some of these numbers, but to live or die by them is, I think, pointless. Search engine optimization is a valid and a true, thing that you can do that Google has said is important. There are different ways to do it. We all have the same end goal. It's ultimately to make Google like your site more today than they did yesterday. And there's different ways to tackle that. So I think there is absolute validity to look at, are we increasing the amount of people to the site? That's an important number. But is it one you should be hanging your hat on as true success? Because I could write an ad saying, free puppies, click here and get you to the site. That doesn't mean that it's valid. Or you could have an incredible blog that is ranking, nationally. Well, if your practice is in Atlanta, Georgia, and you're getting traffic from California, it's not really relevant for the growth of your business. So I think what it requires is an understanding of Google and the website numbers to kind of overlay and put some things together. If you can show that you weren't ranking for a term or a location by running reporting, which is absolutely out there, and it's one of the things we do, show like where you're showing up and not showing up. And then if you're creating an asset, like writing content, you can see that it now exists on the site. Well, then you can start to measure, are we driving traffic to it? Are you in conjunction then seeing an uptick in business? You have to kind of assemble pieces together to get a true, is this working with SEO? Pay-per-click, you're buying your way into the country club. I can put tracking numbers real easy and tell you this many people went here, this many people went to the scheduling forum, this many people picked up the phone. That's real easy to track. SEO is a little more vague. Social media, the way it all ties together.
What is your feeling? And I've asked this to some other guests on the podcast, so I'm curious what your feeling is when it comes to providing Google Analytics to the practice, or breaking up Google Analytics and only taking pieces of it that are in the good of it and putting it into a Word doc and doing it that way. What are your thoughts on that whole process?
I think you should have full access to analytics, but I think, like you made the mention with the x-rays, like you can show it to me. I'm not necessarily going to get the most out of it. So I think there is a way to kind of create more of like an executive summary that makes it a little more digestible. Because the whole idea here is you're working with a specialist, with a marketing company. They should be able to take the not just execute, but take the information and interpret it and make better decisions from it. So I think absolutely having access to analytics is critical, but you can play around in there and not necessarily get the whole picture or not be able to see the parts that are missing. You can only see what's there.
That makes a lot of sense. I've always laughed when I've seen Google Analytic reports sent over and it's like in choppy pieces. And they say, congratulations, we're up 180 visitors this month. But I look at the time spent on the site, and the time spent on the site is on like a minute long. I'm like, what is happening in a minute? Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Or the bounce rate 85%. Well, obviously they're not finding something they're interested if they're bouncing off the site. So
right. And there's some interpretation. Time on site is a really good one, which can mean two different things. If your time on site is 15 seconds, meaning a visitor went to the site and they only stayed for 15 seconds, they probably didn't find what they were looking for. Now, the opposite of that is if somebody goes on the site and they're on there for 4.5 minutes, well, that may be good, or it may be that it's incredibly difficult to find what they were looking for. You can't necessarily just take these numbers and they don't necessarily have a universal truth. So there's this balancing act of, are you getting people there? How long are they staying? Are they bouncing? How many pages are they viewing in that time period? Things like that.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with you. So we've got a couple of topics to cover that we want to cover. So the first thing is, let's talk about content. What content do you think is more important than others?
I think the word blog is often associated with SEO content. And I have sort of an idea on the history of blogging and where content came from. So we know that Google wants you to have content on the site. They want the site to continue to grow and change. They essentially tell you that. What Google will never do is tell you all the things that it takes to be number one, because if they did that, we would all do just enough, and then no one would be number one. So marketing companies knew that content was important, and I would say that there are tens of thousands of marketing companies out there. And my guess would be, just having kind of surveyed a lot of the industry, that most of them are usually like 5 people or less. There's a lot of one-man operations. So they knew that Google wanted this content. Marketing companies aren't necessarily equipped to do that. So they put the onus on creating content back onto the owner of the business to create this content. And that's where I think a lot of the blogging emphasis came from. So doctors and business owners are creating this content and they're putting it out on their website. But if you don't have the understanding of how to get it to rank, you are, yes, growing the website, putting more content on, but it'd be just the same as writing, your turkey brining recipe for Thanksgiving. If nobody's going there or it's not relevant to the business, what is it really satisfying? And that's the reason that I would ask, when you search for anything, how often do blogs come up in the search results? Pretty infrequently, because they're not designed to rank. They're great conversion elements, especially in dental, where you can talk about the cases you've done and that you're the official dentist of the Pittsburgh Steelers or whatever those things. They help convert and they help build the greater picture. But with SEO content, what your goal should be is, look, I know I need to increase the amount of content I have on Google. I'm not ranking in this city, town, village next to me, immediate, down the street, whatever. I'm not ranking for this procedure that I want to rank for and drive more patients for. That's the type of content you need. And so I would say, like, in simplest terms, what you really want to look at is the number of locations you want to rank for multiplied by the number of procedures you want to rank. And that's the kind of content play you really want to look at is you need to prove to Google that this page or this website or my business should be ranking here and for this.
Gotcha. That makes sense too. And then the last thing we wanted to cover was pay-per-click advertising, some stuff with PPCs. Obviously, I think it's a very vital part of the omnichannel approach to marketing. I think you have to play in that space unless you are in such a town that you don't need to get top ranking. And there's obviously some areas that's beneficial to, but in most of the cases, it has to be part of the omnichannel approach to marketing one's practice. So can you shed some light on what your thoughts are on PPC?
Yeah, absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head with it, talking about omnichannel. You have to kind of be doing a little bit of everything now. You have to be doing, your website needs to work. You need to be doing SEO. Your social media game needs to be great. You need to be responding to reviews. You need to be playing with all of Google's tools. And to be really competitive in most markets, you're going to need to look at a paid advertising strategy. This is how Google makes most of their money, is by ads. So it works. Google knows it works. They do everything they can to make the ads look less like ads. They used to be big and bold and highlighted, and now it's much less clear that, it's much less noticeable that an ad is an ad. And as I mentioned earlier, it's your way to essentially buy your way into the country club. You can move to number one tomorrow, and you can buy your way in. But this ultimately ties back to what we were talking about earlier with the website. If you're going to pay to be number one, you better have everything else on point or you're wasting money. It's no different than, buying a fantastic billboard and having no website. All you're doing then is essentially advertising for your competitors. And what you're going to find in dental is it depends on the procedure, it depends on your market, it depends on the number of competitors and the number of people. And Google helps dictate a lot of that, but there are certainly strategies on how to get in front of some of this stuff. And there's going to be different price points that make sense. Like it should be cheaper to drive a new hygiene patient if your office needs it than it does to drive an all-on-4 patient. Like the return on an all-on-4 case is going to be a lot higher. So expect to pay more. That's just the way marketing works. Google understands that it's a more expensive procedure. So do your competitors that are advertising for it. You need to kind of be in line with that in order to be competitive. But I wouldn't put all eggs into one basket anymore. You can't just have a website. You can't just do one thing anymore on anything. You can't just do postcards. You can't just do billboards. You can't just do TV. You can't just do social. You have to have this sort of balanced approach, especially if you're looking at, different types of procedures. I think that's where it becomes extremely critical.
Gotcha. No. And I think that the omnichannel approach, we didn't talk about reviews, but I know your feeling on reviews. They're super important. They kind of are the fuel that runs the marketing that you're doing. But that was great content. Thank you for sharing that with the audience. I want to switch gears now. I want to go over these questions, as we talked about, called pod deck questions. We're going to pick a deck called The Hustle. So the first one's a tricky one. This stumps a lot of people.
Okay.
If you had to open up a lemonade stand tomorrow, what would you call your stand?
Ooh, that's hard to do a quick one. I would go with, I wish I could think of some good alliteration. That's why we have different departments for those sorts of things. I would say, let's go with It's more going to be the logo for me. It'll be Ted's Lemonade, but it's going to be a real sour-faced kid, because I'm not by nature a smiler, and so that's what they would see behind the checkout counter.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Who is one person that you would love to have as a mentor?
I would love to talk to Todd Duncan. Todd Duncan wrote absolutely my favorite series of sales books and time management books. He is from the mortgage space, and he wrote a book called High Trust Selling, and it wasn't one of those books that focuses necessarily on this is what you should say on the phone or those sorts of things. What I found it more was it aligned with a belief system in, having more to you as a person and as a provider, and having things be, it needs to be something you feel and something you trust in terms of a product or a business or a space. Really, really enjoy his content, his books. I think he's fantastic.
Okay, great. What eats up most of your time that you'd like to change?
For anybody who's in the CRM space, Salesforce. Salesforce is one of those entering things of the CRM and managing it. I totally understand, and even on the dental side, needing to have accurate systems and accurate information, because data is power. It's tough for certain personalities. And I think I fit in that of like, I want to put it in and move on. And I keep more in my head than I probably should.
Okay. What do you think your unique skill has helped you become successful?
That one I think is easier. I think being able to take no is hard for people. And I see this a lot in treatment coordinators too. There are some people that are fantastic at spinning the story, telling a patient what they need, or in my case, explaining Google and what's going on. And when the rubber hits the road is when you need to ask the patient to commit. And some people are really, really good at like telling that story, like I said, but just they can't handle the no, or they can't handle it for long, and they leave the industry, or they move to something that I don't know if it's one that you can teach, but being able to take a no and keep going, to get hit on the chin and keep moving, incredibly valuable. And I think it's a skill set. I don't know if I have it by nature or if I just developed it over time, but that's what works for me.
All right. Do you believe there is some sort of pattern or formula to becoming successful?
No, I don't. And I think my thinking in that is sort of shaped by DISC training, the DISC personality assessment, and lots of these different ones fall into the same book. I often see, a company or an industry try to identify and say that this is the perfect person for this job. And I don't think that's always the case. I think there's people that are more adept at it. But I think if you're able to recognize your shortcomings and can overcome them or adjust for them, and not even saying they're shortcomings, but things that are, I guess, would be considered shortcomings for a certain role, if you can recognize what you're not good at and then adjust for it, I don't think there's one way to do anything. I think you can adapt. Perfect.
Last question. How do you capture and keep track of ideas? Do you keep a notebook? Do you have a journal or voice memos?
There's an app called Todoist. Todoist. I love it. You can adjust the board. It's essentially a series of cards, and you can color code who you need. And I have a to do, doing, done, and dead. And it just sort of, I can kind of keep those cards moving and adjust things as I go. And every once in a while, I'll go take a look at it. And if something that seemed really, really interesting to me on Saturday isn't interesting anymore, probably wasn't a great idea. It
gets to dead. Yeah, exactly. All right, perfect. Thank you for participating in that fun little part of the podcast. So, Ted, how can dentists reach out to you if they want to learn more? Do you have a special offer you want to offer? Why don't you go over those type of things before we wrap it up?
Yeah, absolutely. If you go to our website, sociusmarketing.com, pretty much any of the forms, I think there's one that says, let's talk, there's a contact us. All of them have a message field. Just mention the Raving Patients podcast or Dr. Len or me, put a name in, put something in there, and I'll make sure I take a look at it. What we're offering is to any of the listeners is a free audit going through essentially everything digital. How does your website look? How are your competitors looking? How's your organic presence? How are you looking in ads? What should you be doing? Giving a full-on evaluation. that is complimentary to anybody on the podcast, and would love to talk to anybody about that or any other questions that they have related to digital or marketing as a whole when it comes to
And
dental.
then do you want to share your email address with listeners and viewers as well?
Sure, absolutely. It is my first initial T and then my last name, Kozel. So TKOZEL at sociusmarketing.com.
And for those that don't know how to spell Socius, it's SOCIUS, just to let them know, Socius Marketing. Ted, thank you so much for joining me today. This was great. The content was great. The back and forth conversation was great. I really appreciate you sharing your expertise with the audience. If you listen to this and like it, please go on iTunes and review us, subscribe to the episode, tell your colleagues, share it on social, let everybody know. I love doing this. I love sharing my passions with my audience and the experts, obviously, as well. And don't forget to check out the sponsors, both Cloud Dentistry and the Doc sites, to learn more about what they can do for your practice as well. And remember, your reputation matters. Until the next episode, Ted, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to everyone soon.